Working in a nonprofit, remember that the best charity is that which does not perpetuate itself. Never forget that human beings, actual human beings, with dreams and hopes and fears, with pride and favorite foods and things they dislike and like, are the focus of your charity. Numbers, statistics, language can sometimes make the real humanity of people invisible. And sometimes people you expect to be grateful for your charity will not be, at least not in the way you want or expect, because it can be complicated to be the recipient of charity. If your job involves traveling around the world, remember that local knowledge is always best. Yes, read the country reports written by the CIA or whoever writes those reports, but place a higher value on local knowledge. Local newspapers, literature, the person who picks you up from the airport. And if you're one day enrobed in corporate power, and some of you here certainly will be, please hire women as executives and not just in human relations. Change corporate culture. Have an on-site daycare. Make paid family leave standard and ordinary. If you find yourself with power in the world of journalism, banish forever the practice of false equivalence. Journalism should be about the truth, not about balance. If you're reporting on the fact that climate change exists, you don't need to bring in a hack to show the other side, because there is no other side. And if you do become a journalist, please learn how to say, "I'm sorry." Journalism seems to be a profession whose practitioners have great difficulty in saying, "I'm sorry," without hedging or equivocating. And speaking of saying sorry, knowing how to say, "I'm sorry," and mean, "I'm sorry," will serve you well, no matter what course your life takes. And if you are one of those people whose tongues seem unable to form those words, "I'm sorry," there is hope. Practicing in front of a mirror helps. Don't change the subject. Don't pretend that nothing happened. Don't buy a gift and deflect. Don't ride it out in silence, hoping it will go away. Just say, "I'm sorry." A few times if necessary. And of course, it helps if you actually mean it. But please do not ever apologize for existing, or for taking up space in the world, or for having a well-considered opinion. And I say this particularly to women whose socialization teaches us, to shrink ourselves, as though our responsibility is never first to ourselves, but always to others. And we end up sometimes feeling guilty for wanting the things we want, for wanting to be our own selves first. The messages that society sends us can be conflicting. That tension between telling you to value yourself, that you matter, and then that other message that tells you to put other people first and to serve. It is possible, it is necessary that you find a balance between the two, but you will have to figure it out yourself. But if I can offer a useful guiding principle, it is this: you do not have to make room in your life for people who wish you harm. So one enduring lesson I learned here at Yale is always to look at primary sources first. And I've held on to that lesson. It is, I think, a useful lesson, especially in this age of easy outrage, when so many people are quick to react to an isolated quote or sometimes received second or third hand. So I once read a book review, and based on that review, I decided not to read the book because it didn't sound like my sort of thing. Many years later, I read the book because I was at a writing retreat and it was sitting there on a shelf, and I thought I would just read one page, and then I couldn't stop. I loved it. And I could not believe how that reviewer could have so mischaracterized that book. So if you choose to participate in the cult of the outrage of the day on social media, and if you're quick to jump in with your blistering take, and I understand that the adrenaline boost can be addictive, but before you jump in the fray, look at primary sources first. And remember that context is always queen. This is also, I think, a good way of testing your own beliefs. Take a little time to find out what was actually said or done. And if you have context, then maybe, you might just start to question what you thought you knew. Having said that, I do sometimes worry that American education has created a class of brilliant, talented people, but people who are nonetheless afraid to say the wrong thing, even in ostensibly safe spaces. If the world inside of college was safe, then you should know that the world outside of college is not. And I urge you always, always to honor the doubts that you have, honor the questions that you have. Don't silence yourself. So I want to tell you about a conversation that happened among a group of people recently. People who were acquaintances, if not friends, but who all generally were on the same side. And I might or might not have been eavesdropping on their conversation. So they were talking about a politician, and one of them said that the politician was a racist because that politician supported school choice. Another one then asked, tentatively, but how? And the response from everyone else in this group was a lot of eye rolling, a lot of sneering. And then finally, one person gave a treatise on how supporting this politician was just supporting racism. At the end, nobody had explained why supporting school choice was horrible. And there is a valid argument to be made for that position. But this young person was left not knowing what that argument was, and perhaps also left feeling heavier with several layers of shame. I worry that the spaces occupied by the educated in this country have become places where curiosity is considered passé. It is now an environment where everyone is already supposed to know, supposed to get it, and those who don't are seen as morally lacking. If there is a lesson here, it is that you should always remember that a self-righteous sneer is not an argument. Don't be that person who attacks or demeans because you are unable to convince. I know that the idea of bringing receipts is a thing in your generation. It would have been nice if someone in that group had brought receipts. Make the argument, clarify, explain, do the work, cite statistics if you need to, and bring the damned receipts. When I started out writing, I was doing what I loved, what gave me the greatest joy, and I hoped also to be read. And today I feel grateful to be read, to be taken seriously, to be here. My work is very important to me, it's central to my life. But the moments of greatest joy for me are not necessarily those that have to do with my success. And so, please nurture your ambitions, seek to be successful, but keep in mind that there are hollows that success will not fill. And yes, this is where I talk about love. I have a Swiss friend who once lived in DC, but now lives in Zurich. And I asked him what he had made of America when he lived here. And he said, Americans don't have friends because they're too busy working. He meant, I think, people who live in America, whether citizens or not. And so I urge you, class of 2019, to prove him wrong. Have friends, many friends, or just one friend. Hold your family close. And family doesn't necessarily mean those to whom you're related by blood or by social institution. Hold your friends close. Stand up for your loved ones. Tell the people you love that you love them. Tell them often. Find reasons to laugh. Gravitate towards people with whom you never feel that pressure to perform or to be what you're not. One of the tenets I try to live by is never admire quietly. If I admire something about someone, I let them know. We do not always recognize what is beautiful in ourselves, in our spirits, until somebody has pointed it out to us. And remember that people will hardly ever forget small acts of kindness. I remember once doing a public event. I was exhausted, I was a little grumpy. Actually, I was very grumpy. And I was surrounded by people, none of whom seemed to see my exhaustion. And then my friend, Chinaku, who was there, sort of looked at me and said, "She's tired." And I almost burst into tears because I felt so wonderfully seen. Be kind. Paying attention is one of the most beautiful acts of kindness. The people you will come across in your life will not forget when you're kind, and they will not forget when you're unkind. I wish you well as you go out into the world. I wish you courage. I wish you joy. And on a final note, as you navigate the world, it might be helpful from time to time to forget that you went to Yale. Congratulations.
All right. Words. I'm lacking words from this particular beautiful and momentous moment with Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I not tired, and I cannot easily get exhausted listening from her. In fact, one of the key aspects that I've taken from her is that it's an act of kindness when you're listening with intention. She says that, and also being able to realize that she, even as she has stated, that she's tired, something that also makes her elated and feels like, okay, yeah, the audience was listening. And in fact, that is a moment, it's a sentimental moment to be able to grasp that one. But again, Chimamanda has always time and time reminded us of our of humanity at large, that even as somebody who had come from a different world into another world here, culture clash, trying to see how people are, seeing things and having different perspectives from which that she had as she was growing up, literally by sharing her anecdotal instances, epic moments when something did, happen, when she did have to undergo a scenario. And again, meticulously, she does, weave that one in her work. given that she's a great storyteller. Her stories, in fact, they say stories are one way of being able to get the attention of your audience, and I do find that I agree that she's able to articulate her, narratives, tailor suiting them with those anecdotal instances in every occasion she does that on, trying to bring out an aspect, a perspective about a certain viewpoint that she feels like she needs to back it up using either her life, her personal experience, or a friend of hers. But I would say that we are blessed to have, maybe at this particular time and this particular generation, somebody like her that I, without doubt, do recommend that to be able to listen to and learn at a great deal and a great length. I do not want to distill this kind of information because my words enough cannot be, given the fact that the context at which she said, some people do, analytically look at her work, failing to put her in that context within which maybe she did say something, and therefore people render maybe their own thoughts and their own perspectives, views are totally contrasting and totally irrelevant of what she said according to which context she did say that one. So without that, distilling too much, I hope that you've had it nice up to this particular very end. And of course, this is just again to be able to reiterate what she did from this particular channel here, trying to learn from great people, people of influence. I can tell you, Chimamanda has, to some extent, I can tell you that it doesn't really, put anybody, it doesn't really her work cuts across. We can see her work really touches several dynamics of life, and that's why I find that her work is so interesting, even as I've been trying to follow through. And I know that there's a great deal and a great length that you're going to learn from this Queen of Africa. Guys, I'm going to patch it at that particular point, and if you do come across this particular work by accident, how about a thumbs up, a subscription, and a tiny little comment on the comment section of this particular work? And I know this work has been from an archive. I did pull it from there, but you see what? Internet does not lie. And I'm going to leave at that particular very end for the other generations to come. See you later.